Joining me on the line now is Tanya Unkovich, a personal consultant and mentor as well. Morning to you, Tanya.
Good morning, Mel. How are you today?
Very, very well. Now, first up, I must offer my sincere sympathies to you. I know you lost your dad just before we went into this lockdown, and it must be a very hard time for you.
Well, it is, and even though he lived a long life and you know it's going to happen, nothing really prepares you when you lose a parent. It's a very big thing in life.
It really is at any age too, and particularly, which is why it's such a valid thing to be talking about today, when we are in such a state of turmoil with lockdown. I mean, how do you cope with grief during lockdown?
Well, it's what I call complicated grief. It's something that we've never really had to learn. We weren't taught this, were we? We weren't expecting this in our lifetime. And so no one really knows until you are in it and until others can teach you what it's like. Grief is a part of life. I always say that grief is a part of life. It's a part of love. It's actually something that we say when you grieve, then at least you know there was love there. But when something happens like this, when you lose them suddenly, during a time when you can't be with them, or when you can't say your goodbyes properly, when you can't bury them, when you can't watch the coffin go into the ground, that brings up so much more complication in that grieving process. And, it's something that we're all learning right now as we're living through it. And here am I, a grief specialist, and I'm having to live what I have written about and kind of talked about all of these months. So I can tell you firsthand, it's not easy, but it's it's just something that you have to accept. That's the first thing I say, acceptance.
Because that's the thing, isn't it, with grief and in times of mourning, what is the first thing you do? You come together. You come together with people and it gives you such support when you're mourning, when these people are there for you, which obviously in lockdown, physically, that can't happen.
No, it can't happen. You can't have the funeral. You can't be by the graveside. It makes, when people actually don't know how to grieve and feel when they're alone, they need people around them. This is a very, very difficult time. So my heart goes out to everyone who's really struggling in that way right now. Coming together is a part of the grieving process. So somehow we have to do it.
So how do we do that?
How do we do it? Well, thankfully, in this modern world, we have got Zoom. We have got the ways to communicate. We've got the telephone still. We've got some way of being together without that physical touch. Then again, some people have that deep need for physical touch. Their need for love and connection might be a lot higher than someone else. We all grieve and feel differently. I say to people, don't run from your grief. Feel it. Feel the sadness, because it can be very easy for us to go into this place of blaming and anger and blaming everyone else out there for our pain inside. I mean, the grief and the pain is always going to be there. It's just about managing all of these uncertainties and the inability to be together that we've just got to do. We just have to do it, because the alternative is to kind of fall into an abyss of pain and suffering. And it's about making the decision not to do that to yourself.
It's interesting too with grief, because I know that when my father died very suddenly, and it wasn't during lockdown, that a lot of people said to me, oh, it gets better in time. I thought, well, and then one person said to me, it's not so much that it gets better, and I totally agree with this. It doesn't get better, it just changes, and you cope with it. The grief is always there, isn't it, to some level?
Yeah, you learn how to live with grief. You learn how to allow grief into your life. You cry, and then you allow the joy, which follows. It's about integrating grief and sadness and joy into this big bundle called life. It's different. Life is different when we lose someone. There's no doubt about it. And it's about learning how to feel that sadness, learning how to remember the good times, remember the beautiful memories. It's about learning how to honour them. One of the things that gets me through is, what would my dad want me to do right now? he would actually want me to stand up and be an example to others on how we can move through this kind of grief, how we can keep living. His nickname was Smiley. He'd want us to be laughing, so I think of things like that, which gives me the strength to go, Tanya, yep, sit and cry when you need to, but also stand up and be strong when you need to.
What about for people that who need some sort of closure, because quite often they need to have that closure and that farewell at the end, because maybe they've had some fights in life or something's not gone right, but they need that ending to sort of end. If they can't do that, how do they deal with that in lockdown?
It's always a good thing to write letters, to write to them, to journal your feelings out, just to get it out. You know what they say, underneath all anger and discontent is often sadness. What lies underneath so many feelings is sadness. So to actually access those feelings, to talk about it with someone, if you can do that. Some people still hold it all inside, but I really encourage you to feel it, to journal it. If you've got a spiritual life, now's the time to deepen it and to say, help me, God, through this one here. This is a tough one for me. So reach out to whatever access you have to comfort.
I was listening to our news, and funeral homes are reaching capacity because people are holding off for after these lockdowns to farewell their loved ones, because obviously you can only have 10 people at a funeral, whatever, at the moment. How do you deal with that? Do you put the grief on hold, or how do you deal with that?
Well, our decision was to actually lay my father to rest, which happened yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yesterday or the day before? Gosh, forgotten. To actually send him back up north to where he was from and to bury him. And that was a conscious decision we made, because it was either that or sit in the rest home, and that didn't quite feel as good for us. So it was about accepting, okay, we are one of many at this time. It doesn't make it easier, but it's about accepting that we have to make a decision, and we need to sit with this decision and still do the best that we can to grieve. The funeral directors are amazing. Our funeral director was amazing. He sent us beautiful video of Dad being buried. He honoured him. He spoke beautifully of him. I just watched it before I got on the phone with you. Actually, probably wasn't a great idea, but it was wonderful to see that and everything. And I just hold on to what was good. I was blessed to be able to be by Dad when he died. And I know that some people can't have that, which is heart-wrenching. I don't know how that happens, but we just need to find a way to come together at this time, to bury the hatchets, to unite together in order to help each other through these times, because they are unique times. It's uncertain. What a time for us to all to come together now and help each other through whatever it is that we're going through.
Well, Tanya, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Obviously, still very, an emotional time for you, and appreciate the insight into grief during these times, and best of luck for the rest of the lockdown. Fingers crossed we can see each other in person soon.
Yes. Thank you so much.
It's Tanya Unkovic, who of course is she's a mentor and has gone through grief herself with her father, personal consultant as well at these times. I was talking with Kaiora Tipene a while ago about grief, and how during the last lockdown she said the hardest part was, as a funeral director, having to farewell these people who needed to give them the farewell they deserved when she's doing it on her own in the funeral home. She said it was really, really hard. So the funeral director's really stepping up at the moment.